joining us for the news at noon. I'm Drew Carney. Top story this afternoon, the impact the government shutdown is having on some of the biggest airports in the country, including here in Portland. The FAA and U.S. Department of Transportation said they're cutting flights because of the growing number of air traffic controllers who are calling out of work. Those workers are not getting paid right now because of the shutdown. Here's KGW's Corey Johnson.
Federal officials announced the cuts Wednesday afternoon, saying the move would likely lead to roughly 3,500 to 4,000 flights being impacted daily. Now, the FAA has already been delaying flights at some airports because of the widespread staffing shortages. Beginning Friday, the Federal Aviation Administration will reduce air traffic by 10% at 40 busy airports, citing growing fatigue among air traffic controllers who have worked without pay since the government shutdown began on October 1st. And most have been on duty 6 days a week while putting in mandatory overtime. And as the shutdown continues, those staffers will miss their second full paycheck next Tuesday. But some travelers say they understand the predicament traffic controllers are in, and they're also frustrated by the news.
I honestly, if it wasn't my birthday and I didn't really want to go somewhere, I wouldn't fly. So I'm not going to be flying after this for a very long time, honestly.
Seattle, Tacoma, San Diego, and San Francisco international airports are also included on that list that are set to have reductions beginning on Friday. Back to you.
All right, Corey Johnson there at the airport. Next stop, a live look outside from our Wells Fargo Skycam. Quick break from our news headlines here this afternoon to talk about the weather. We have Chris McGinnis in the Weather Center for this morning, or I should say this afternoon, Chris, filling in for Rod Hill. What's the latest for the rest of the day?
So that live look from the Wells Fargo Sky Camera?
Yeah.
Didn't look all that bad.
No, it did not. Better than this morning.
Wait about 10 minutes. Okay, so here's a look at radar right now. There are literally another batch of showers here bearing down on downtown here just to the west. In fact, let me just peek out. Yeah, the sky looks a little darker out to the west. These are working their way on off to the east, and they will be whipping on through the metro area over the next 30 minutes or so. We'll give you a perspective here over the last 3 hours. There have been a few bands of showers passing through. The latest is now hitting the I-5 corridor here, Portland up towards Vancouver and Kalama and Kelso and Longview, and there's more where that came from. In fact, if anything, I think our afternoon is going to wind up getting a little wetter as we get deeper into the afternoon commute, 3, 4, 5 o'clock. So be aware of that later today. It's 59 right now in Sherwood. Big perspective across the state. Pendleton, one of the warmer spots on this map anyway, at 62. After a chilly start, Burns is up to 52 degrees at last check. And again, our Wells Fargo Sky Camera showing us at 59 degrees with a south breeze at 8. The breeze will pick up, and the rain is going to pick up, I think, as we go through the rest of the afternoon. The temperatures are not going to go very far. I think about 58 or 59 is where we top out, maybe 60, but you get the idea. Staying fairly uniform in the temperature department. Rain and increasing wind in the forecast, I think, for this afternoon. More on that, and then look ahead to a dry weekend, believe it or not. That's coming up with my full forecast in just a few minutes.
All right, thank you, Chris. Developing this hour, Portland Public Schools on high alert after reports of heightened ice activity at several schools in North Portland. KGW's Jake Holter is covering this story for us live outside Cesar Chavez School. So, Jake, what can you tell us?
Yeah, Drew, a secure the perimeter protocol went into effect here at Cesar Chavez as well as at George Middle School this morning, but that has since been lifted. Now, that means that exterior doors were locked and that activities had to remain inside. Teaching and learning continued on as normal, but again, that has been lifted. PPS said that other schools like Astor, James John, Roosevelt, and Sitton are maintaining heightened situational awareness. Security is in place, and school leaders are working on a dismissal plan to make sure that students get home safely and smoothly this afternoon. Portland Public Schools reminding parents that it does not work with or share any information with DHS without a valid judicial warrant. And school officials are also reminding parents to make sure that their emergency names and contacts are updated just out of an abundance of caution. Drew?
All right, Jake Holter with a bit of a weather report there to go along with today's news update. We appreciate that, Jake, in North Portland. All right, let's talk about what's happening in Salem, the second largest school district in Oregon, planning for another round of cuts. The Salem Kaiser School District says it's slashing its budget by $25 million next year. Here's Thomas Schultz with more.
Well, there's a sense of deja vu in Salem. Last year, the school district cut $70 million in hundreds of jobs. This go-around, district leaders say the cuts are necessary to address a growing gap between revenue and expenses. In a letter, the school board says 95% of its operating funds go towards salary and benefits. They say those costs are increasing by 9% each year. Last year, the school district narrowly avoided a teacher strike by agreeing to a deal worth $42 million over 2 years. A strike would have closed schools. In a statement about the upcoming cuts, Superintendent Andrea Castaneda says, quote, "Our top priority will be protecting teaching and learning conditions for our students. We can look at options together and make hard decisions together." For years, Castaneda has pushed state lawmakers to better fund public schools. The legislature responded by giving schools records amount of money in recent years, though some educators say it's still not enough to fully fund the education system. Salem Kaiser says it'll learn more about its budget in next school year once it hears back from the state, which releases its updated economic forecast in the next couple of weeks. They do say those cuts could be greater than $25 million. Thomas Schultz, KGW News.
SNAP benefits remain in limbo because of the government shutdown, but there are a lot of local businesses and community groups who have stepped up to help out. Local artist Mike Bennett is holding a community event to help pet owners who receive SNAP benefits. Anyone with a dog knows how expensive that food can be. So Bennett is partnering with Pet Pack PDX and the Filling Station Pet Supplies to paint the world's longest wiener dog. It's happening next Tuesday. That's when volunteers who donate pet food can help paint a 130-foot-long dog around a building and parking lot by Bennett's art studio.
They're going to feed their pet before they're going to feed themselves. And that's really sad, and especially if they're older or have children, and many of our folks do have kids.
And not being able to get what their dogs need, can be really, scary and frustrating.
Again, the painting event is next Tuesday, Veterans Day, over on Northeast Fremont between 11 and 3. We also want to remind you, if you're looking for help or know someone who is, we have a list of local organizations that have stepped up to donate, fundraise, and give out free meals. If you text the word SNAP to that number on your screen, 503-226-5088, we'll text you back with a link to the list on our website. The state of Oregon made its case to the U.S. Supreme Court yesterday in a huge test of President Trump's use of tariffs. The Solicitor General, arguing on behalf of the Trump administration, told the Supreme Court that the president has the authority to impose those tariffs as a way to conduct foreign affairs and negotiate trade deals. The administration says this is all allowed under what's known as the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. But Oregon and other states, along with a group of U.S. businesses, argue there is no emergency here. They also argue that the tariffs hurt Americans because of the higher price tag they put on imports, saying the tariffs really just amount to a huge tax and that only Congress is allowed to impose taxes, not the president.
I think the facts really speak for themselves, and I think this was compelling for the justices where no other president had ever used this power to try and implement tariffs. Every other president had used the appropriate statutes that Congress intended. I think that weighed heavily.
Two lower courts have already ruled against the White House in this case. It's not clear how long it will take the Supreme Court to reach its ruling. All right, here's a look at some national headlines this afternoon. Democratic Representative Nancy Pelosi announced today that she will not seek re-election next year. Pelosi had stepped aside as party leader for the Democrats 3 years ago, but continued to serve as a member of the House. The 85-year-old led the party in the House between 2002 and 2022, serving as an ally for Presidents Barack Obama and Joe Biden. Political experts say her decision will spark a fierce contest to take over her San Francisco-based seat. All right, we have some new video here of a car explosion that happened in New York City yesterday. At least 5 firefighters were hurt. You can see the massive flames from the distance. The firefighters who were taken to the hospital are being treated for burns, some of them more serious than others. All right, want to be a millionaire? This is your next best shot. The Mega Millions jackpot is up to an estimated $843 million, the 8th largest jackpot in the game's history. That's because no tickets matched all 6 numbers in Tuesday night's drawing. So the next drawing is set for tomorrow night. And that's a look at some of today's national headlines.